It isn't just about porn and sex. They are the weapons formed against you to therefore steal your ministry, to destroy your happiness, to rob and steal and kill from you. That's what the enemy is doing with the sexual sin of porn, sex, love addiction. See the bigger picture, and then he disrupts your oneness, and you can't easily become salt and light in a hurting world because your head drops. You're doing the belly button gazing. You haven't got time to lift your head up and be salt and light. And the enemy does this.
So, Gary McFarlane, it's a real pleasure to talk to you. Now, if anybody hasn't heard of you, well, they need to hear of you because you're a counsellor in a very difficult but very prominent field these days, and that's porn addiction. Now, we've met before personally, but we also interacted virtually over email recently about the Child Commissioner's report for England, and she'd made some observations about how prolific porn was or is among kids, and kids as young as 13 having access to porn, mainstream or in fact at 11, I think, with some of the youngest citations she'd made, etc., etc. And we can point to other articles on that particular report. But porn is a problem not just for kids, but also, in fact, in marriages. I'm myself aware of a number of individuals who, in fact, their marriages have been wrecked because of porn use. And the stats are saying it's an increasing problem. So I want to talk to somebody like you because you're an expert in the field of why it's a problem and what to do about it. And in our day-to-day support of marriage policy and marriages themselves, Gary, it's just a joy to welcome you to the Coalition for Marriage.
Such a privilege, Tony. I really appreciate this time to just share some knowledge with folks in what is a difficult area for us, particularly the Christians, to go near.
And that's a good point you raised there because so we've got Coalition for Marriage, UK's largest pro-marriage organisation, tens of thousands of supporters, Gary, from all faiths and none. Most of them, I would guess, are Christians. In fact, it seems to be the case, but we've got a lot of non-Christians and a lot of people from other faiths too. Everyone who agrees that actually marriage is the thing which describes what one man and one woman do for one lifetime, to the exclusion of all others.
Yeah.
And that is an important thing because it has a big impact on society in a way that nothing else does. And when we forget that, we have lots and lots of repercussions as we're seeing all around us. And so I wanted to focus on this thing about the problems with porn and what to do about it if we could. And we'll try and keep it as high level as we can without going into too many explicit things. But, we want to help kids. We want to help adults if indeed we can. My first question, my starter for 10 would be, Gary, what's wrong with looking at porn? It's just images, isn't it? I mean, if you're not doing it and you're only looking at it, is there a problem?
The problem is it is adultery. If you look at a woman with lust in your eyes, you're committing adultery. Now, Tony, I've had a conversation with our God, and I said, Lord, that's a bit harsh, isn't it? You're not actually doing the act itself, with the hope that one day he might remove it from the Bible. I haven't succeeded thus far, so I've come to terms with, oh my goodness, this is adultery. This is adultery. But just before I finish this answer, what I would say to you, Tony, is why don't we think about a wider context of porn being done by children, women, and men? But the context is men and porn, tut, tut, tut. Men and romantic novels, what's the problem? We're wired differently. Us men tend mostly to be visually stimulated and aroused, but mostly, women tend to be wanting the verbal, the oral, spoken word, and or the read word, i.e., the books, the novels.
Yes.
They are equally problematic. Men and porn, women and romantic novels. But with women and romantic novels, what's the problem, Gary? Tony, there's a big problem out there, but we don't see it because it's not porn, is it? Yes, it is.
There was, of course, I haven't read it, but the 50 Shades of Grey, of course, that was a big thing, very popular among the ladies. Alan Titchmarsh's work, he doesn't just do gardening, he does a lot more in his potting shed. He writes books, and they're, very popular among the ladies. So you're absolutely right, that there's the stark stuff that we hear of, and that, you kind of, you see just browsing the internet, without looking for it, it just pops up sometimes. And then there's the more subtle forms. You're absolutely right. You mentioned God, and I would agree with you from a Matthew 5 perspective. Anyone who looks on a woman to think about her sexually is committing adultery in his heart, let alone the physical. So that's fine. But what about, marriage is a thing for all of mankind. So what about people who might say, well, yeah, I'm not a Christian. I don't believe in that book. Actually, what's wrong with a bit of porn? It stops me committing real adultery, and it keeps the marriage fresh. So, outside of your scripture, what's wrong with a bit of porn?
The problem is typically porn has got into people's lives way earlier in the past, and it likely has become a habit. Whenever I use the word habit, this is my hamster wheel now. It's going to start to turn, and typically, the young person, the child, may have some issues going on in their life, which is creating upset, anxiety. So they learn to go to their room, play with their Lego, PlayStation, game console, whatever. But when at some point, even by accident, porn comes across their sight, it's naughty but nice. The problem is it's now setting up something as the hamster wheel starts to spin. What they're not aware of is that these potent chemicals that they're getting from the dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin going into their body is giving them a feel-good factor, an escape for a period of time. And it doesn't seem to be a problem because I'm not hurting anyone. But the problem is, Tony, those behaviors that were started back there may just lay dormant for periods of time until later on, when the brain recognizes, even in adulthood, your experience, you're feeling, hey, do you remember what we used to do back there? Let's go and do that again.
Yep.
So something gets opened up again. There's the coping strategy, the managing strategy. And so porn is not about porn, Tony. Sex is not about sex. It is a way of trying to manage emotions by getting those chemicals into the body.
Well, that's really, really interesting. And you say it starts young, and we could kind of trace it from there, because we've got, there are so many avenues we could go down here. I want to talk about solutions in a minute, because that's really, at the end of the day, whatever the reason, there are going to be people stuck in it, and we need to find a way out. But in terms of the getting there, so we've got situations in our society at the minute. It's very interesting. You've got, I think there's Lily Phillips and Bonnie Blue, I think they're both called. And these are two women who are competing to see how many men they can have sex with in a day. And I think the current number is 1,050 or something like that. And both of them are trying to push the bar higher, blah, 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 which has sparked an awful lot of outrage among the chattering classes and even some of the liberal elites, which is quite ironic, because we teach our children in school that the only thing that matters is consent. And we teach that from a very young age. And presumably this woman has consented. So, which makes you think, so it's not the fact that she's sleeping with a lot of men, it's the number of men in the short period of time. So what's your number? What's your acceptable number? Is it 10 in a week? Is it 5 in a month? what's your acceptable number? And we don't seem to even conceive of the need to teach children about chastity and to teach children that actually sex, as you say, that those serotonin enablers and things, sex has a wonderfully strong bonding power between two individuals. It's like, what is it? The packing tape, really strong packing tape, and you put it on, you rip it off, you put it on, and it loses its stickiness. And no wonder so many people getting married who've had sex before marriage find that actually they're just not glued together in the way that they were meant to be. So is that the sort of thing you're talking about?
The description of the woman seeking to get the record of men they've slept with, I offer my hypotheses and say, of course, it's not really about sex. This is love addiction. There's a difference between porn addiction, difference between sex addiction. There's a difference between love addiction. So whenever I write something, you'll see sex, porn, love addiction.
Interesting.
The love addiction is really about trying to get attention, because what it's actually doing, Tony, is trying to fill a void in the person's life that likely got set up back there in the past with this thing called insecure attachment, because the disruption in the bonding between the child and the main caregivers, typically the parents, because something happens that disrupts that bonding. I've got quite a stark image, which I'll hold up to try to explain it. That's the image. What we know from this clever man called John Bowlby is when there is a disruption in the bonding between the child and the main caregiver, the parents, this void, this emptiness develops. It's relevant because as the child grows up into adulthood, the brain, I'm picking up, just getting some of my props, Tony, the brain of the little child remembers, is carrying the sense of rejection. It's a strange word because it doesn't seem like rejection, but that's how the brain's receiving it, where the bonding, because parents are to be the lighthouse to help the child navigate life as they're growing up. But where something disrupts that bonding, whether it's emotionally, the parent just isn't around, work, long hours, and it's not a criticism of the parents at all. Boarding school, there's all sorts of things, fostering, adoption. It's that void that gets set up. So what's happening in adulthood is the individual is trying to interact with various people, but mostly they keep them at arm's length, because if you let your heart go to any one of those, they may finish with you, which feels like rejection that happened back there in childhood. So you're keeping your distance in a sense, but you desperately want to be accepted by people. So you're interacting in the group. So my hypothesis is these are love addiction behaviors to get a sense of being wanted, being accepted. And of course, the media interest fuels that. And for 5 minutes, they feel good, but it wears off and they have to go and search out more people to interact with. That's a long-winded answer, but...
No, it's very good. And the literature, well, of course the literature, because you're steeped in it yourself, but the literature would support everything you're saying, especially things like father loss for girls, at an early stage will make them seek the approval of men.
A big deal.
Yeah, and people can ignore that and say how, but actually the stats are quite clear on that. The literature is very, very clear on that. It is an issue, and we need to think of how do we help single parents, mums with girls, to compensate for those sorts of things. Absolutely right. So given the fact that, and of course, there's two sides to the coin, isn't there? There's the porn creators, who we're talking about now, but then there's also the porn consumers, who I heard a very sad tale at a conference recently that a third of all porn these days is consumed by girls. And it's not because they're interested in the sexual aspect of it, but they're looking at it to see what's expected of them. And it broke my heart just to, as I've got four children, three of whom are girls, to think that, it beggars belief, really, that if that is indeed the case, and the whole concept of the default for sex is no longer no, but yes, and you have to have a good reason not to, as opposed to the other way around.
Under pressure. And so little Kathy is only aged 9, 10, and she wants to be a porn star when she grows up. Oh my goodness. How on earth did that even get into her development? But the stats are right. That's why I keep saying this thing called porn, it's women. So I don't use men first because that seems so obvious. It's women, it's children, and it's men. And we got it. And it's increasing. And it went up exponentially during COVID lockdown worldwide. It is at pandemic levels.
And specifically then for men in marriages who are, I mean, you provide counselling for people who are trapped in porn at all different stages in life, but I'm thinking particularly the effect on marriage of porn addiction. I mean, there are various ways you could get into that as a husband, issues with the relationship or just bad behaviour, in terms of your own use of your own computer and that sort of stuff. But what sort of effects is that going to have on a marriage? I mean, why should it have any effect? There are some writers who would say actually it's going to spice up your marriage, it's a good idea. But actually the prevalence of opinion says no. Why is that okay? You've mentioned it's adultery. Are there any other reasons, expand on that for us, why it's a bad idea?
Absolutely. Because you are in an affair with somebody else. What I do is I personify porn and call her Mrs. Porn. You are sharing your sex life with Mrs. Porn. A wife, a partner cannot compete with Mrs. Porn, sexually or in any other way. And it is so painful when a female partner finds out because she can't just go down the road and knock on the door and scratch her eyes out, leave my man alone, go and get your own. She can't fight back. And it is really debilitating for a female partner who try to fight back by doing what I call, Tony, the Ann Summers thing, where you go off and buy the latest gadget, lingerie to fight back. And she'll always, always lose when 2 months later she had come outside of her normal, acceptable sexual repertoire and found that despite doing that, 2 months later he's gone back to porn. It's debilitating. The damage being done includes the individual is becoming sensitized to their partner's body in terms of keeping the erection. And so a young person doing porn from age 12, 13, 14, by the time they're in their 20s, they need sex therapy.
Right.
I'm a psychosexual therapist. I just say sex therapist. And they're already suffering from erectile dysfunction because the female body that they have as a partner is just not able to help them keep the erection because they've been dining out on 50 odd bodies in recent weeks. Therefore, that one partner just can't compete with those bodies they've got. So much damage, apart from the deceit, of course. Shame means hide, hidden. And then the partner thinks when they find out, they're so badly hurt. But of course, they think they must be to do with me. Doesn't fancy me, must be my fault. I need to. It isn't because of you, female partner. These behaviors got set up before the person knew you, even if they were dormant.
That's interesting.
Lots of damage, Tony. But also, the fact is, if you commit adultery, even with your eyes, Tony, and the lust, and you've had sex, you are creating that soul tie with individuals. And that soul tie are partners in the bed, the marriage bed. So the marriage bed is being defiled constantly, constantly. And it needs cleansing because that person's sexual partners that you've done things with, even in the mind, actually end up becoming a part of the sex life of the couple.
And you can easily see how it just breaks the bond of solemnity. It breaks the bond of individual commitments
Yes.
to each other, because you've fractured that. You're saying, well, the deepest part of my emotional and physical needs, I'm actually exploring and expressing with somebody else. In fact, multiple other people who I don't even know, to the degree that it becomes insatiable, because I want ever more and more, hardcore this, hardcore that, so more extreme this and more extreme that, and like you say, you break that physical bond, you break the emotional bond, and you get trapped in a downward spiral.
And it is a downward spiral to
yeah,
keep
yeah, and many people have said that to me. It certainly seems to get its grip on people in quite the way.
We must smile for a bit, despite hearing all that. Oh gosh, we must smile and not pack our bags to and say there is a way out. There is help. You really don't need to live with this. And the way the marriage has been, there is help, people, and you can get to a really good, healthy place. But it's likely to need a third party help,
of which you provide, which is great. And I know that often these things are very, very complex. It's not like, if you just hold your left wrist and spin round 3 times, that'll sort it out. Yeah. It's not as easy. It's very, very complex, and it depends on situations. And often, as you've mentioned, it depends on resolving childhood trauma even. So there's lots going on there.
Yeah, before you go on to some recovery program, you've got to deal with the impact of the trauma back there. Now, trauma isn't just what happens between Russia and Ukraine. Trauma is the 6-year-old whose game console was taken by the boy down the road. And when they went to get it, the boy's father slammed the door in the little 6-year-old's face, saying, "It's not yours, get lost." And little 6-year-old goes crying home. That is trauma relative to the brain of a 6-year-old who now remembers it 30 years later.
Yeah. So tell us, obviously we don't want any specifics, but so think about 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 of your clients who have been who are married and who have been stuck in a porn addiction, and whom you've helped get out of that and resolve the situation and fix their marriage. From the porn addiction perspective, tell us some of the routes you might go down. And the hope here, Gary, is that somebody who might be listening, whose marriage is being wrecked, whether they know it or not, by porn addiction, might hear something that might help them turn the other way, if you like.
First of all, Tony, they've got to get to a place where they say, actually, I can't stop this on my own. I really do need help. And then you must search out for a specialist. It isn't just a general counselor. It isn't just pastoral help, because the Bible talks about there's something somewhat different to sex in terms of sin. Sexual sin is somewhat different because the sexual sin gets on the inside of you. And so the individual has got to own the fact that probably they have a compulsion or an addiction, and I need help. Come out of denial, then search out a specialist. And the work then for me would be just a 1-hour session where you're just listening in order to identify the fact that, yep, there is an addiction, there is a compulsion. And then the first work Tony, really is. Let's look at what set it up back there. Even if you weren't actively continuing it all through your growing up years, something set up the desire to do the behaviors back there. What was going on in the little child's life back there? And it's not a criticism of parents. Before we criticize parents, we must look at the parents who parented them. It's not a criticism, but we're all unique and we need life done in a particular way for good outcomes. So parents try their best, but there's stuff that happens that sets people on a trajectory and they come across stuff that is self-soothing. So first, deal with the underlying stuff that got set up in childhood. And I use this thing called EMDR, eye movement desensitization reprocessing, not just send people at this level. This is the child, this is 1 to 5, deal with the trauma. Then 6 to 10 is a recovery program. You will need a recovery program, but don't miss out the early stage of finding out and processing the impact upon the developing child of traumas. You've got to deal with that first, because all the brain has done is found a coping strategy. For some, it's drugs. For some, it's alcohol. For others, it's the eating disorder. For others, it's porn. And so if you get rid of one compulsion, Tony, or one addiction, the brain is going to find the co-addiction that's waiting in the wings to come in through the back door to deal with the reduction in porn. But then I'm drinking an extra glass of wine with my meal. Look at the number of increased recycling bottles I'm putting out, because porn isn't about porn and sex isn't. It's about managing emotions and self-soothing. So if you get rid of one, something's going to come through the back door because you're trying to self-soothe from some stuff back here. Deal with the stuff back here. Does that make sense?
It really does make sense. It really does make sense, because it comes down to your view of yourself, your view of your relationship with the other person, and those things are heavily influenced by your upbringing, your experiences as you're a little child, in a way that we're not even aware of ourselves.
Don't give it much credence. It's just me being me, doing life how I do life.
Yeah.
Life isn't a level playing field. What's the problem?
Yeah. And I'm conscious. I mean, it's such a sensitive topic as well for Christians and for non-Christians. I mean, who really is going to be brave enough to go to their pastor and say, "Look, I'm a bit addicted to porn"? It's almost if you're the sort of person who's in a situation to get addicted to something like that, you're probably not the sort of, well, maybe, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but it seems to me are you the sort of person who's going to really be willing to stand up and say...
It's a good first start to go to somebody in confidence. The problem is the pastor may not be the right person, because if they don't handle that information well, it's going to increase shame. Shame is already a part of the problem of keeping you hidden. Shame means hide. Don't let anybody find out. With this mathematical formula, as I call it, Tony, shame plus narcissism equals porn addiction. So one of the components you have to go after is shame. The second part, I'm not saying my client's a narcissist. What I'm saying is all those with porn sex addiction will have traits that come out of narcissism, which is me, myself, and I.
By definition, it's self-indulgence.
It's self-indulgence.
It's by definition, isn't it? Really?
Yes.
It's self-gratification and self-indulgence at the expense of relationship with others, and that's definitively what it is. So
empathy,
call that what it is, which is narcissism. That's fine.
So empathy and narcissism cannot coexist in the same person at high levels. Either you can have a high level of narcissistic behaviors, self, and a low level of empathy. What you've got to do is turn that around. But somebody with narcissistic behaviors ain't going to see the problem. I think that they're giving and doing for others. What they don't see is She is conditional upon something coming.
So you would say, go and get some proper help. So where would, I mean, we know we can come to you, you can give us your contact details, but if we can't get to you, because you're only one guy, right? And I know what that's like. Where would people go for help?
Yeah, the organization, and it's a mixed number of people, Christians, non-Christians, obviously mostly non-Christian therapists. It's called ATSAC, it's ATSAC, and it's the Association of Sex and Compulsivity Therapists who are well trained in this specialized area. And the well trained is really important. It's not just a general therapist who can move into dealing with porn, sex, or indeed any addiction. You've got to go to somebody who is really well trained and therefore really understands that porn isn't just about men behaving badly. There's something that happened back there. And that's why I do have a bit of a bee in the bonnet, Tony, where church headquarters and the likes that step people down. And it's really a sledgehammer. The stuff gets found or found out, but they don't really have a proper understanding of how it got set up and why it got set up and why it's kept going. They're just seeing men behaving badly, pastors definitely behaving badly, going to step you down. And a lot of damage has been done. Of course, there needs to be a stepping aside for a season, but you've got to understand why and how they came by the behaviors and are doing the behaviors. Get the right treatment.
And again, even in ministry situations, which you're referring to, again, it almost like it never becomes a thing until it's a massive thing because somebody's found something on someone's computer and they didn't feel they could talk about it earlier on enough, etc., etc.
And that typically is how it happens, Tony.
Yeah. Well, exactly, and that's really good points. Have you got, so if and I don't know if you'll have any advice here at all, Gary, but if there's a wife out there, and it is typically a wife who's suspicious of her husband being porn addicted, or indeed has found out and is really disappointed and is having a trouble dealing with it, have you got any advice for a wife in that situation? It's maybe an unfair question.
No, not at all. I'm so pleased you touched that one, because what I want folks to understand, any porn, sex addiction, love addiction work with me is all about the couple recovery. It's not really about the individual with the addiction. So they're typically going to be a partner who he caused the problems, and now the family budget is being spent on him getting the help. What about me? What about me? What about me? And she typically she has a right to what about me? So the work is always to see if we can be alongside her separately, no crossovers of sharing information between the two. But what she potentially would need is psychoeducation. That's just a posh word for imparting knowledge to her to better understand this terrain of porn, sex addiction, how it came about, and equipping her with knowledge that you didn't cause this, you didn't contribute to this. It isn't because of you. And that's really hard to come to terms with, really hard. But if it can come from an authority figure like me, a specialist, she might begin to acknowledge it and begin her recovery. So I do a separate work with the female partner to help her. So what I say to her is, whether or not he's willing to get the help is available for you, Mrs. Partner, Mrs. Wife.
So the small number of people I've encountered and spoken to about this sort of thing, it's as if, so they were married to somebody and they believed they had a certain life and a certain love, and then they found this out. And it's almost like everything they thought they were and everything they thought they had in their life was an illusion. And it's the same as adultery. The life they thought they had was a complete illusion. The person they thought they were married to was a complete illusion. And they're wondering, what else in my life have I got wrong? Have I got everything wrong? Am I just a fake individual? And it's almost like emotional collapse. The trauma is so great,
Right.
So it's a massive effort for for supporting women who are, who feel their husbands are stuck in porn
It's
addiction or something else as
massive.
well.
You got it right.
Absolutely.
You
Yeah,
described it
absolutely
really
right.
well. The photo album that I'm looking at of us,
Mm.
and I've just found out and learned that when I was in hospital giving birth to
Yeah,
our
yeah,
first child,
yeah,
you were what? Doing what?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
But this is 30 odd years of our memories. How do I rebuild that memory? This is serious trauma.
It's absolutely devastating. Similar with adultery. And like you said at the beginning, it is adultery. Don't mess it. It is adultery. But I would say the important thing is talk to somebody.
Talk to
Yep.
somebody.
Get some help. Talk to somebody.
But not the wrong person, Tony. It is, forgive me, no disrespect. It isn't just another person in church or pastoral care, because this is such a specialized area. They'll misunderstand it and treat it like men behaving badly with it's more than that.
It is more than that, and I'm really getting that message from you. You've given us a place to go and look up somebody. You've how would we contact you if we need to contact you directly?
Yeah,
Gary?
my website is www.kairos, Kairos hyphen center, centre.com. So Kairos hyphen center.
CENTRE.
Yeah,
Yep.
and I'm Gary McFarlane. You'll find.
And we'll put that up there, Gary,
Thank you.
and people will be able to look at that, and also the organisation you mentioned earlier on, because this is one of those things. It is solvable, right? It is solvable.
Absolutely, you can
If people
recover.
want to get help, we can sort this out.
You can, absolutely.
Yeah, better than sorting it out is preventing it in the first place. And one thing I do a lot of, Gary, is going up and down the country, running marriage courses and helping people sort out their marriages in a way that as best as possible, the likelihood of this is preventable in the first place.
Kairos firstly means your appointed time. But it was established on this verse in the Bible, John chapter 10, verse 10. For I have come so that you may have life, live life to the full, in abundance, in excess, overflowing. I brought all the different translations into that. God has got excess abundance in married life for us. However, part A of that verse is this: the thief has come to steal, to kill, to destroy. That's what he is doing. Your heads up, people, and see the bigger picture. It isn't just about porn and sex. They are the weapons formed against you to therefore steal your ministry, to destroy your happiness, to rob and steal and kill from you. That's what the enemy is doing with the sexual sin of porn, sex, love addiction. See the bigger picture, and then he disrupts your oneness, and you can't easily become salt and light in a hurting world because your head drops. You're doing the belly button gazing. You haven't got time to lift your head up and be salt and light. And the enemy does this.
Yeah. And that works whether you're a Christian or whether you're a non-Christian, Gary. Absolutely right for both parties, really. And I would encourage people, if you are facing some kind of porn addiction or you know somebody who is, get in touch with Gary, get in touch with the organisation we mentioned. And if you want to prevent it happening in the first place, get in touch with us, have us down to do some pre-marriage stuff, some post-marriage work with you, or whatever is required, just to, marriages are great. We need to get them staying great. We need to persuade society that it's the best thing for men, for women, and for children, and for the culture at large. And, all these things are so important. Gary, it's such a joy to talk to you. I'm really glad that you're doing the work you're doing, the important work you're doing. And will you come back and talk to us again sometime soon?
Yes, please. But please pray for me. The enemy does not like me doing this work.
Absolutely.
And I'm frequently in the lion's den where he's trying to get me out.
I'll see you in that tent, right? Because we're both there together. Well done, Gary McFarlane. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Tony. Best wishes.